This is incredible.
Such a great idea.
How did you come up with this?
It's practically genius.
I'm Lindsay McGuire.
And I'm Ryan Greaves. And this is Practically Genius, an original show from Formstack.
What drove you to get involved in change management? You know, I think when we think about change, it can seem very scary, it's unsettling, and it can be difficult as well. So what attracted you to get a role in change management?
So I started managing project about 12 years ago. And I was back in Nigeria at the time, a young project manager, and I was implementing this security project for an organization in the energy sector, one of the largest local oil producing companies in Nigeria at the time. And we did the good work, the design, the implementation, everything went really good. And it was the time to get to the people aspect of it, where we deploy to users that are actually going to use this solution. And, my naive self, not knowing nothing about um, project change management, we deploy to everyone as we've always done. We deploy to everyone and, yeah, this is done. We want to go. But all of a sudden, I got a call from one of the C levels, like I think it was the CFO, the CFO for the organization called me and said, I want you guys to take all your stuff out and get out from this organization. Basically, he couldn't work. What we did affected him. So he couldn't work, he couldn't do anything. And that was what happened at the time. And that was just like, gonna be a failed project, no matter how wonderful or how great the work we've done was. And I went back and I was discussing with someone, and the person said, why not, manage it properly instead of going, big bang. Let's go. Let's use a phased deployment. Let's use the communication channels within the company. Let people know this is coming. The person didn't call it change management at the time. It was just more like a phased deployment and having a deployment plan. So we worked with the communication department of the company using screensavers to communicate, letting each department, each location knowing when it was going to be their turn. And one of the other things we did at the time was to work with the IT team, which was more like the technical team. We trained them on the application. So in change management, that is called having change champions. They were our change champions, and they were able to go to all these other places to talk about the change. They were the first level of support. So when we deployed, um, if people had questions, they were right there and there to like, calm nerves. This is just what this is doing. It's just gonna happen today. It's not gonna happen tomorrow. It might not happen for the next 1 month. Calm people so people are able to work. And that was how we were able to. That was actually my first experience with change management.
One thing we have seen a lot is no matter how much time you put on the front end of planning everything, seeking out the right solutions, building a process, if you don't do the second half of that, you will fail every single time. So you definitely made some great points of it's always coming down to the people. And one thing you brought up that I think is really interesting, I'd like you to talk more about, is you identified those change champions, right? Bringing those people in from the very beginnings and ensuring that they are within that whole entire process. Can you talk a little bit about how someone can identify those change champions within the other departments?
Yeah, I'll use an example. I worked on a project recently with one of the government departments in Manitoba, and it was a digital transformation project where we had to change from um, the usual way of, paper-based paper-based way of getting things done, moving file from one room to the other and things like that, to change it to the digital way, create workflows where the process flows all through, from start to finish. One of the things I did was I spoke with the different heads of the department to identify people. So we're looking for people who knew a lot about the job, that's the job function, and then people who were more IT savvy, people who were able to use computers, who were not, that had a very good advanced knowledge of computers. Because the thing is, you're able to train those people easier. They know the solution, so they're already computer literate to an extent. They have some of the skills you need, and at the same time, they know the job function. And at the same time, they are from their team. They are from that particular team, so they have the rapport with other members of the team, and it's easy to get questions flow. Like I would find it easier to ask my colleague a question about something, rather than go to a consultant that just came into the
Mhm.
organization, because the relationship is there. Um, so that's how I usually go about change champions. I find people who are more who have relative knowledge, who have the minimal barrier point to the change that is happening, because it's easier to get them on board, and then they just help the other folks. If it's a core IT project, I will usually work with like the IT department, the IT team, because it's expected that they have a bit of an advanced IT knowledge, IT background, that are able to help, the non-IT users. And because it's their environment, they provide support to those people on a daily basis. They have that relationship. It's the help desk we all call when we have issues. So by working with the help desk, making them change champions, it's easy to get that change resolved and, have a successful change there.
Yeah, it really sounds like. So, how do you go about changing that mindset of, well, this is the way we've always done it, so this is the right way to do it, or there shouldn't be a need to change? How do you go about changing those mindsets?
Yeah, so, as much as we want everyone, to adopt. We want everyone to be able to get the benefits of the change. We want everyone to be able to use the change that has been implemented. It's at times you cannot win everyone to your side. Um, Not everyone would want to come on board. Those, at the end of the day, it comes to a personal decision. The what a change manager would do would try as much as possible to make a compelling case for the change. And a lot of times, changes are not usually like the reason for a change is usually externally driven rather than internally driven. It's usually maybe we want to improve our bottom line, we're trying to save cost, we're trying to comply with maybe a new regulatory requirement, you know, or our competitors are doing something that we also need to do to get ahead of competitors. So it's usually externally driven, and a lot of times we don't have a choice. Changes, mm, and this is the truth, changes will usually get implemented whether the users, at the end of the day, it boils down to the person and being able to overcome the barriers that have been identified. For some people, they just, you would encounter people that they just want to keep status quo. They don't want to change. And they're gonna tell you that, like, I've been doing it this way, this works, they're gonna tell you that. And the goal is just to get as much as you can get from the people to adapt and be able to use this solution effectively so you're able to get the value desired from it.
Yeah, you brought up a lot of things that we actually cover in a report we're about to launch, our digital maturity report. It's called the State of Digital Maturity, Advancing Workflow Automation. And one of the things we did was we surveyed 2,000 U.S. full-time and part-time workers and asked them different questions about, how are you adapting your processes? What are you doing in your day-to-day business? And we then segmented all those answers by digital maturity level. And we realized there's a huge gap between the most digitally mature organizations and the least digitally mature organizations when it comes to how they identify how they're using their time and how they identify how those changes impact them. For instance, the least digitally mature organizations a lot of times are wasting, their employees are wasting at least 2 hours per day on those manual and repetitive kind of data entry tasks and things like that. And yet they have the mindset you talked about of, well, this is the status quo. This is how we've always done it. This is how I've always done it. And then layering on top of that conversation, we also found too that there's concerns about, well, what happens if this is automated? What am I going to do? Instead of that thinking of, think about all the things I could do, right? So I think it's very fascinating you bring that up because our research definitely showed a lot of what you just talked about.
The future, there's going to be a lot of changes. We're talking about automation, intelligence, yeah, machine learning, deep learning. COVID showed all of us a lot of things that could happen rapidly. We went from going to the office to um, everybody working from home, everybody doing things, the way they've not been used to. So things are going to change. Organizations based on w- previous ways we've handled things. Businesses were kind of very reactionary to how we do things. COVID happened. We don't know what the next disruption is going to be, and organizations are preparing very well for the next disruption. There was an article that I was looking at, and you would see that a lot of the organizations that we have today are not necessarily prepared for the future yet, which could go in many ways. We could become, it could be a greener future where we are more environmentally conscious. It could be a more automated future where everything is AI, machine learning, and things that automation is key. It could be a future where businesses, like some of these businesses that are changing rapidly and growing rapidly will end up taking over some of these businesses that are not um, doing well right now. So there's going to be a lot of changes. That's the common denomination of everything that's going to happen in the future. It's going to change a lot, and the successful organizations of tomorrow are those organizations that are well adapted to changing.
Yes, I totally agree. And so, how can an organization begin to be more comfortable with change? What's some of your advice to those organizations that might be lagging behind on that digital maturity, who might be a little bit less proactive in their choices of change? How can they start adapting to that?
Yeah, I would say the first thing, the key thing is, look at the data available um, from different sources. From, if you look at ProSci, if you look at some of the surveys on change management, even from some of the data gathered from Gartner, from all that, look at the data, and you can see that there is a compelling case for change management, for the people side of change of management. And if organizations want to be honest with themselves, if they look at previous projects and adoption levels, they can also see the need for that. If you keep implementing projects and it takes a longer period for your employees, for the people that are supposed to use it, to adapt to it, to get to use those tools, change management is very important. I know a lot of organizations see it as, oh, I have a project manager, that should be enough. But let's go back 10, 15 years from now. Project management was almost at that level where people did not see project as like having a project manager to manage a project as key. There was a manager, an operational manager, and they believe the operational manager should be able to do things until projects started failing. There was a lot of money being lost on, we start something, we don't finish it because things were not being completed, things were not being done the way it should be done, actually because there was no project management. That's the very, very, very short form of it. Some of the top organizations have actually built their own change management framework, adopted it, and they use it even with some of the clients that they work with. So I would say look at the data, and once you look at the data, you should be convinced enough. The next thing is um, it all starts with empathy for the people, putting the people you work with first in whatever change you do. We're implementing this change. We just don't want to dump it on your laps. We want to know what are your concerns with it. We want to help you to adapt. We want to help you to be able to use this. We know you have concerns. For sure, there are concerns, but we want to help you to overcome those concerns, those barriers that you think you might have. Do you need more training? Do you just need to know more about the tool? At times, it's just, oh, this change. It's just like we want to implement this change. We want to know what you think about it. A lot of people would not even say anything. A lot of people will not provide any feedback. But the fact that you just inform them that this is coming, they feel valued. It's being valued about that could break a lot of barriers. And that is where it starts from. It starts from, putting the people first before the processes, before the technology. And that's how you can get into that point.
Going back to what you said about kind of having the kind of outlines or project scopes for change management, if an organization isn't quite at that level, which it sounds like most are probably nowhere close to having some kind of change management system implemented, for those who are just thinking about where does change management fit into my organization, can you speak a little bit about that for me?
Yeah, so where does change management fit into the organization? I'll say it fits into everywhere. So every organization, as long as you have people and you're making changes, the only organization where, no change management is required is if no change is happening. That means it's the same people coming to work, using the same tools every day with no change, no promotions, no reorganization, no updates to tools, just the same people, the same thing every day, then you could do without change management because it's just the same thing you're doing. But if there are some changes involved, you have to have an holistic approach from the technology to HR to communications, and most importantly, from the top. There has to be the executive buy-in. People in change management, we encourage leaders or sponsors to lead by example. There has to be that executive buy-in. If something is happening, people want to hear the reason why it's happening from the top. If we're changing, oh, we want to implement this, so people want to know why that is happening from the top. They want to know what is changing, why it's changing from the top. The CEO, CFO, they need to take ownership and they need to communicate it. They need to be able to answer some of the questions on why. And how it's now the structure or what ProSci recommends is, at the lower level, how it's going to impact my work. I need to be able to have that discussion with my manager. So there's something we call a sponsor coalition for change. That is different people from different teams working together to sponsor the change. So it's a cooperation sort of where, I'm managing this part of the change, I'm managing this part of the change in order to make it work, which is different from the change champions, the early adopters. That's different. This is just at a top level. So HR, how it affects people's work, am I gonna get paid more? Am I getting more work without money? Those questions, you need those questions to be answered. So, which is why it has to be a, a holistic approach. The whole organization has to come in because it usually touches almost every point of the organization.
And one thing you have kind of touched on, which I haven't really thought about before, but I find really interesting, is that it almost sounds like project managers should consider themselves change management specialists. I don't think a lot of people probably think that way, but I almost find it funny that I've never thought about it that way. So, what are some change management principles you think every project manager should follow?
So ideally, project managers should see themselves as like change managers because um, they are usually implementing a change. But at the basis, at the foundation, at the basics, I believe every project manager should, for your project to be successful, especially if you're implementing a project that will impact people, you should do at the foundation, your requirements should put the people that you're implementing this project for at the forefront. A very good example, somewhere in Western Africa, a United Nations project was done to provide um, pipe-borne water for a particular village. The usual thing for the village was for them to go to the stream, fetch water, and walk all the way back. They had to walk a few kilometers down to the stream and come back. So they put the borehole, the tap, and everything running in the middle of the village, so they don't have to walk to the stream. They don't have to do all that, which made perfect sense. It's an efficient solution from all. If you look at it, makes sense. But then a few months, it was discovered that the village did not use it, which is
Mm.
surprising. All right. But then, what we noticed was after further investigations and things like that, it was found that like most of the women, because women did the fetching of water in that village, and what they did was the journey to the stream and back was an opportunity for them to interact with other women, to chat and to discuss. And by putting that in the middle of the village, they lost the opportunity. So they still wanted to chat and discuss. And so they would rather go to the stream, get water, and come back. But as a project manager, you can ask some of these questions on, why is this being done? You put the people into perspective, you put the people in focus. So whatever solution you're implementing, you're making sure it is tuned to what the people would use, not what you're just implementing. You can implement the most. If you meet a project manager that tells you all my projects have been successful, 100%, is most likely lying. He's telling a big lie. And that's the truth because you have some failed projects, you have some projects that did not go as planned, you have some projects that you start and you're like, what the hell did I get myself into? You get a lot of that, but the point is learning. I see life as an ongoing learning session. You're learning things as you go. It's back in the university, I did a course. It's called control systems. So when you design a control system, you have the input and you have a desired output. Out of that desired output, there is a feedback system. Now, a negative feedback is good for the system. You use the feedback, you put it back in order to get towards your desired output. A positive feedback, according to what we're taught at the time, is a positive feedback kind of disrupts the system, is not so good. So it's all about creating your life or everything you do as that control system. Use the negatives, embrace changes that don't go well, things that you did not do as well as you would have. Learn from it. Use those lessons in the future. Use those lessons in the next change. Because was it Thomas Edison when he invented the light bulb and they said, you failed 999 times or 1,000 times. He said, I've only learned 1,000 times how not to make it work. And it's about having that attitude to it, knowing things will not always go my way, but I'm always ready to learn the lessons from it.